Hello, and welcome to our presentation on the Pick a Path OER game, an activity meant to help students find affordable course materials. I'm Mélanie Brunet, the Open Education Librarian at the University of Ottawa, and I'm joined by Savannah Gorbahn and Tyler Stevens, both former co-op students at the U Ottawa Library and the brains behind the game. First, some context about the University of Ottawa. It is a bilingual English-French public research university located on the unceded territory of the Algonquin people in Canada's national capital. It offers over 550 undergraduate, master's, doctoral, and professional programs. As of September 2023, there are about 48,000 students at the University of Ottawa. Roughly 70% of those students study in English, while 30% study in French. The cost of textbooks has been on the library's radar since 2018. In 2022-2023, students were expected to spend between $86 and $124 per course on textbooks in undergraduate programs. This represents between $860 for French programs and $1,240 for English programs per year for a full course load. But what students have reported spending, while still a substantial amount of money, is lower. For the same period, students reported spending on average about $523 in the library's textbook broke campaign. Many surveys show that at least 60% of students do not purchase required textbooks at some point during their studies due to cost. The difference between expected and reported spending at U Ottawa reflects this trend. Short of going without required textbooks and risking the academic success, what can students do? The library held workshops on how to save on textbooks legally in the fall of 2022, online and in person. We discussed a variety of cheaper options, including purchasing directly from the publisher, using previous editions, sharing the cost with a friend, turning to the library and asking the prof to put a copy on course reserve, and consulting the OER by discipline guide for free and open alternatives. These were poorly attended, but inspired the game that Savannah will discuss next.
As the Open Education Assistant at the time, I helped Mélanie with these workshops by creating the Saving on Textbooks handout pictured on the previous slide. As a separate task, she also asked me to brainstorm ideas for an in-person game that could raise awareness of OER and library resources with students. Inspired by the workshop topic, I created the game to be run in person during Open Education Week as an interactive activity to inform students about their options when navigating textbook purchasing. It is loosely modeled after escape rooms and choose-your-own-adventure novels. Students progress through different locations and scenarios in a large room to gather information and make choices that affect their adventure in textbook purchasing. The premise of the game is you're a student starting a new semester. You've received a list with all your required textbooks. You're living on a tight budget and are hoping to save some money on textbooks. Your choices will help you discover ways to lower your textbook costs. Using my own and my fellow students' experiences, I created scenarios or locations that players could visit. For example, new students could go for a walk with a fourth-year student who would tell them about illegal websites, co-purchasing textbooks with other students, use bookstores in Ottawa, or use U Ottawa textbook groups on Facebook. At each location, including the library, the campus store, and websites, players could learn about an aspect of the textbook market. For each scenario, possible positive and negative consequences are discussed. If they share textbooks with other students or use the library's copy, they may not have the book when they need it, but they could create a study group. If they look for used copies, they might spend lots of precious time searching. If they purchase from the campus store, they will spend a lot more money, but could have the books promptly. If they found OER, they could also have access to a lot of supplementary information and extra quizzes to help them study. The game was designed to funnel players towards scenarios, teaching them about OER. Ultimately, all choices led them to meet with the Open Education Librarian.
When I took over as Open Education Assistant the following term, Mélanie asked me to create an online version of Savannah's in-person game using Twine. Twine is an open source tool for telling interactive nonlinear stories using variables and conditional logic. The back end of a game looks like a web of interrelated decisions. Games are published in HTML, and then Twine is available as a desktop app, or it can be used in the browser version. The browser version of Twine is available at twinery.org. So building on Savannah's original game idea, Twine coding was used to maximize the amount of possible paths, allowing players to customize their experience based on their field of study among the 8 faculties at the University of Ottawa. I integrated many of the locations and scenarios from the in-person game, adding a budget and energy level because shopping for textbooks costs money, but also looking for bargains and alternatives takes time and effort, so I wanted to incorporate these aspects into the game. While the Pick a Path OER game is not officially available yet, due to some coding glitches and work currently being done on the French version, we can provide for you a preview. Players choose in which field they want to study. Each faculty presents different challenges, variables, and textbooks which students in those fields would recognize. The situational aspect was designed to be as realistic as possible using actual required textbooks and cost data from the University of Ottawa. Once players choose a faculty, their adventure begins. In this case, they chose science and are now enrolled in the honors program in biomedical science. In this example, the student has a budget of $350 and starts with 100% of their energy. They have 4 required textbooks to acquire. Of the 4 textbooks, in this example, 1 is an OER, and the student is invited to consult with the Open Education librarian in order to learn more. At the campus store in-game, the student can buy all, some, or none of the textbooks. In this case, they decide to only purchase the least expensive one for now. Back on the home page, the student now has a bit less energy, has spent more than a third of their budget on one book, but is currently meeting academic expectations as per the parameters set in the back end of the game. Meeting with the Open Education librarian gives the student the opportunity to learn more about OER and also invites them to learn about Creative Commons licenses specifically. The game then details the different Creative Commons license symbols and explains what can and can't be done when you see an OER with a given license. Other possible actions that can be taken in the game and that lead to different decisions include studying for a test, going into debt, having to work to pay off debt, going for a walk, searching for used copies of textbooks at the thrift store, and going to a restaurant.
At the time of recording this talk, the English version is undergoing some bug fixing. Tyler is also working on completing the French version. We are aiming to make these public next February and launch the game for Open Education Week 2024. Then it will be indexed on various sites for greater discoverability and track its use and feedback. Thank you for viewing our presentation.